The night had fallen heavy across the vast stretch of prairie, the kind of night that swallows sound and sight until all that remains is the whisper of the wind and the low call of unseen creatures. The moon hung like a pale lantern over the ridgeline, spilling silver light across the dry brush and broken earth. A young woman named Clara had been traveling alone that evening, her leather satchel slung across her shoulder, her long burgundy dress rushing against the dusty road as she walked with cautious determination. She had left the small town miles behind, searching for her uncle's ranch where she was meant to stay. But her horse had been spooked earlier and ran off, leaving her stranded in the dark. As the stillness deepened, Clara began to sense something following her. At first it was faint, just the crunch of grass, the sound of paws pressing against dry earth, but soon it grew louder, clearer, until she could hear the low growl of coyotes circling in the shadows. Her heart began to race as her eyes darted across the land, catching fleeting glimpses of glowing eyes in the moonlight. Fear wrapped around her chest like a vice as the realization struck. She was being stalked. Every step forward seemed to echo back with the soft padded steps of predators, trailing her. She clutched her bag tighter, her breath shallow, whispering small prayers under her breath as the chorus of howls began to rise in the distance, sending chills down her spine. Alone, vulnerable, and unarmed, Clara felt her courage waver, yet she pressed forward, determined not to stop, for stopping meant surrendering to the pack. The coyotes edged closer, their shapes slipping in and out of the tall grass like shadows brought to life, their hunger tangible in the way they growled and barked at one another, preparing to close in on their prey. Clara's pace quickened, her boots crunching against the dirt road, her eyes scanning desperately for any sign of safety, any light or figure in the darkness. Then, just as her legs threatened to give way beneath the weight of her fear, a sharp crack split the night. It was the unmistakable sound of a rifle firing, loud and commanding, rolling across the plains like thunder. Sparks flew in the distance as a bullet struck the ground just feet from where one of the coyotes had been circling. The pack yelped and scattered, retreating swiftly into the brush, their glowing eyes vanishing into the night. Clara froze, her breath caught in her throat, until she turned and saw a lone figure emerging from the shadows of the ridge. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a dusty vest and wide-brimmed hat, the glint of steel from his rifle catching the moonlight as he lowered the weapon and strode toward her with steady, confident steps. His presence alone seemed to quiet the night, his silhouette against the starlit horizon as commanding as a guardian carved from stone. Clara's eyes widened with both relief and caution as he approached, her heart still racing. The man stopped a few feet away, his voice low but firm as he said, "You're safe with me." Something about the tone, the steady certainty, the calm strength wrapped around her like a blanket against the cold fear she had been drowning in. Clara's trembling eased as she finally allowed herself to exhale, her hands loosening their tight grip on her bag. I didn't know what to do," she admitted, her voice quivering, though she tried to keep her composure. The cowboy gave her a small nod, his eyes kind but vigilant as he scanned the darkened fields for any sign of the predators returning. "Coyotes travel in packs," he said matter-of-factly, his voice gravelly yet reassuring. "They don't fear much, but they know enough to fear a rifle." For a moment they stood in silence, the only sound the rustle of the breeze through the grass and the lingering echo of the shot that had saved her. Clara studied him more closely now, his weather-worn face shadowed by his hat, the leather belt at his waist holding a revolver, his stance calm but ready, as if years of danger had taught him how to stand unshaken in the face of threats. "Why were you out here?" she finally asked, her curiosity soft but cautious. The man's lips curled into the faintest hint of a smile. "Saw your horse run past earlier," he said, adjusting the rifle slung over his shoulder. "Figured someone was out here stranded. Didn't expect to find trouble waiting too." Clara's chest swelled with gratitude as she realized just how close she had come to being overpowered, and how fate had placed this stranger on her path at the right moment. "Thank you," she whispered, the words small but heavy with sincerity. The cowboy tipped his hat slightly. "Name's James," he said simply. "Come on, it's not safe to linger. I'll get you where you're headed." And though Clara hesitated, unsure, If she should trust a man she had only just met in the darkness of the wilderness, something deep inside her told her she could. The steadiness of his eyes, the way he had stepped between her and the danger without a second thought, and the gentleness in his voice convinced her that trust was not misplaced. Together they walked along the dirt road, the moon guiding their way. Clara stayed close to his side, every step easing the remnants of fear still clinging to her. The shadows seemed less threatening now, the silence of the plains less suffocating, for James's presence was like a fortress she knew nothing could penetrate. As they walked, he spoke sparingly, asking where she was headed, nodding when she explained about the loneliness she carried, about the journey she had hoped would mark a new beginning. And though James did not speak much, he listened, and that listening meant more to her than words ever could. Hours seemed to slip into minutes as they pressed onward, the glow of distant lanterns finally appearing across the valley, signaling the ranch that had once felt unreachable. Clara's heart swelled with relief as the safety of family and home came into view, but part of her also felt a strange pull, the realization that this night, terrifying as it had been, had also brought her face to face with someone who felt like more than a stranger. When they finally reached the ranch gate, Clara turned to him, her eyes lingering with gratitude and something unspoken. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of the night's fear and the warmth of its unexpected salvation. James gave her that same faint smile, tipping his head again as he prepared to leave. "Just stay safe," he replied simply. "That's thanks enough." With that, he began to turn away, his figure retreating into the shadows of the night as quietly as he had appeared. Clara stood there, watching, her heart torn between relief and wonder, knowing she might never see him again, yet certain she would never forget him. And as the coyotes howled once more in the distance, their cries faint and powerless now, she whispered to herself, remembering his words, "You're safe with me." To everyone listening to this story, if you enjoyed this journey and wanted to hear more tales of courage, survival, and unexpected heroes, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because there are so many more powerful stories waiting to unfold, and I don't want you to miss a single one. The night had not entirely loosened its grip on Clara's heart even after reaching the safe glow of her uncle's ranch, though James had left her at the gate with nothing more than his calm reassurance and the echo of his footsteps fading into the dark. She could not sleep that night, lying on the guest bed. The sound of the coyotes' distant howls still haunted her ears, but even more, it was the image of the cowboy, his steady hands, the fire of his rifle cutting through the danger, and his words, "You're safe with me," that replayed again and again in her thoughts. Dawn broke in streaks of gold and crimson over the horizon, painting the valley in warmth, but Clara's restlessness grew. She rose early, helping her aunt with chores, but her gaze constantly strayed toward the road beyond the fence, as if expecting him to reappear. By midday, word had spread of the coyote pack growing bolder, threatening livestock, and Clara realized James hadn't simply vanished into the night. He was out there, still walking the dangerous ridges, rifle in hand, keeping watch. The thought stirred something deep in her chest, a mixture of fear for his safety and admiration for his quiet courage. That evening, unable to resist, Clara wandered back toward the dirt road where they had first met. The prairie stretched wide under the sinking sun, and just as the shadows deepened, she saw him again, leaning against his horse with his head tilted low. James looked up as she approached, his expression softening only slightly, the kind of man who had learned to guard his emotions yet could not hide the flicker of recognition in his eyes. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. Clara smiled faintly, a mix of defiance and gratitude in her voice as she replied, "That's what you said last night, too. And yet here I am." His lips twitched into the barest shadow of a grin, but then his gaze shifted toward the brush, always alert, always watchful. For a moment they stood together in silence, the world around them vast and dangerous, yet somehow smaller in the space between them. Clara's curiosity grew, and she asked him why he lived this way, wandering the ridges, carrying his rifle, always on guard. James was quiet for a long time, then finally spoke of a past marked by loss, a family taken by bandits, a homestead burned, a man left with nothing but a rifle, and the will to protect others so they would not. suffer the same fate. His words were steady but heavy, carrying the weight of scars invisible to the eye. Clara listened with a heart that ached for him, realizing that his strength was not born from invincibility, but from pain, from survival, from choosing to stand between danger and the innocent because he had once known helplessness himself. As the night deepened, the coyotes returned, their howls closer than before, bolder, as if challenging the man who had driven them back. James stood tall, rifle ready, his presence unshaken. Clara, instead of shrinking back, stepped closer to him, her fear tempered now by trust. "You're not alone," she said softly. Though her voice trembled, her courage fragile yet real. The coyotes appeared in the brush, eyes glinting like embers, their growls filling the air. James raised his rifle, but before he could fire, Clara placed a hand lightly on his arm. "Let me stand with you," she whispered. He glanced at her, and for the first time his hardened expression broke, just slightly, enough for her to see the flicker of surprise and something unspoken respect, perhaps even hope. The first coyote lunged, and James fired, the shot cracking through the night. The pack scattered but did not fully retreat, circling, testing. Again and again James fired, each shot true, until at last the howls faded, and the predators vanished into the darkness for good. Silence fell heavy and complete, broken only by Clara's unsteady breathing and the faint click of James reloading his rifle. Then he turned to her, his eyes steady, his voice low. "You're safe with me," he repeated. But this time the words carried more than reassurance. They carried a promise. Clara felt her heart swell, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and something deeper, a bond forged in fear and fire that no words could fully capture. She knew then that she would not forget this night, nor the man who had stood between her and the darkness. In the days that followed, James visited the ranch more often, sometimes under the pretense of checking the land for predators, sometimes simply to sit on the porch with Clara as the sun dipped low. Their conversations grew from cautious exchanges into shared stories, laughter, and the quiet comfort of understanding. He remained a man of few words, but in his silence, Clara found more meaning than in any speech. His presence was a shield, his gaze a promise, his hand steady when the world threatened to shake. And slowly, the woman who had once been stalked by coyotes in the night began to find not just safety, but strength in herself, knowing she was no longer alone. The story of that night spread across the valley, whispered in town, told with all the tale of a cowboy who fired his rifle into the dark and told a frightened woman she was safe with him. For Clara, it was more than a story. It was the beginning of something she never expected, a bond that grew not from chance, but from courage, trust, and the simple, powerful truth that even in the darkest nights, there can be someone who steps forward and says, "You're safe with me." And to those of you listening now, if this story touched your heart, if you believe in courage, love, and the strength of standing together against the shadows, then don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because more stories like this one are waiting, stories that will take you through fear, hope, and triumph, and remind you that sometimes heroes appear when you least expect them.